Path of Exile Delirium League has been a bit of a wild ride for me. I chose a league starter that may not necessarily have been the best one to choose. Instead of going with the tried and proven one, I decided to go with one that is brand new and is probably a little bit too gear dependent. I also had a little bit of trouble with the Delirium mechanic myself, and I guess I'm not entirely alone in that. Been hearing a lot of criticism from the community, and I think there are some things I want to say about it. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about my starter build, the current build I'm working on, the Delirium mechanic, and what I think about it, and how I think GGG is fumbling the handling with this one just a little bit. Now, I just want to preface all of this by saying that I actually very much love Path of Exile, and I think it's important to be critical of the things you love because then hopefully they're pushed to be better. I just want to see it succeed. So, let's get started. Hello Exiles, this is Ryan from Behind Eyes Gaming, and welcome to another Path of Exile video. If you're new around here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified of future Path of Exile videos. Also, if you want to just chill out, talk with me, talk with some other people about Path of Exile, or really anything, check out the link in the description below. I have a Discord server you can join. Let's get into the good stuff. Starting off, I want to just go over Delirium. I think Delirium has a lot of interesting things about it, and I think it has a lot of potential. So having this kind of race against time where you move outward with the fog and you fight for greater and greater rewards against greater and greater enemies, that's a great concept. However, one of the things that I feel they really got wrong was the scaling. It feels like my characters that were easily clearing yellow maps when I got into yellow maps could not even clear into blood aqueducts all the way to the end in the Deliriums. And that's a little bit of a problem. I feel like the scaling is a little bit over the top, and I think perhaps that needs to be scaled back. And this is both in terms of damage and survivability. Sometimes in a map, it feels like I'll be one-shotting every pack, and then I'll move outward like 2 feet, and all of a sudden the monsters are so tanky that I can't even take them down. So this is a little bit of a problem. Now that I'm using a blatantly overpowered skill, which I'll talk about later, it is feeling a lot better, and I'm often getting close to the end of the maps, provided I survive, because there are still a lot of one-shotty mechanics, and the rewards feel pretty good. Pretty often when you manage to get a lot of them, at least. Once you get 5, 6 or so stacked up, starts to feel pretty great. But that is one of the issues I have. But the single biggest issue I have with this league, with this mechanic, is gotta be visibility. Visibility is a huge problem right now for Path of Exile Delirium League. This has been a problem in the past with Metamorphs, but I felt like I adapted to it because it was a small portion of the screen. I felt like I could just kind of get used to it. I'm having a very difficult time adapting to this. The gray and white aesthetic is where everything kind of looks the same. I feel like some of the little spiky mobs that explode on death also look like the little missile things that come out of the pods, and those do a lot of damage to you. And sometimes I turn back and I think I'm going to fight some mobs, and instead, because they're both like little pod things, I end up getting a bunch of missiles to the face and explode and die. Or sometimes I'll turn back to grab a piece of loot and a bunch of the little spiky boys will explode on me just because I decided that I really needed that alchemy orb on the ground. So a lot of hard things there, but also sometimes I don't know which kinds of monsters I'm fighting. I know I'm fighting a large group of monsters. I'm surrounded by it on all sides. That's not bad. It kind of forces you to do a few things, but because of their overtuned damage and because I have a hard time differentiating between those, it ends up feeling a little bit cheap to me. It feels like artificial difficulty. I'm having a really hard time learning it, which is something that, you know, in action RPGs, you want to learn the different mechanics of the different enemies so that you can play against them better in the future, so that you die less, and you're able to take them out more efficiently. This is very difficult when I just can't see them. I can't tell the difference between them, and I often can't even distinguish between them and the regular mobs in the deeper fogs. So that is a huge problem for me, and I think that's something that GGG should address. And they did recently put out a manifesto talking about the different Delirium issues and things that the community have said. Reading through that, I'm not 100% confident that they're going to tackle all of the issues I have. They did say they were going to work on visibility, and I'm hoping that's the case, because if that gets fixed, I can deal with some of the other problems. I might have to just make a jug that never dies and kind of creep my way through and slowly build up my power until I can actually take out some of those enemies. But yeah, I can definitely deal with it as long as I can see what's going on. They need to fix the visibility. They need to fix it soon. It's really, really bad. I think it's the worst it's ever been. And that's saying something, because they've had a lot of leagues with very poor visibility in the past. Next, I want to talk about Kinetic Bolt. Kinetic Bolt is a skill I decided when I looked at it had a lot of potential for scaling. I thought of a bunch of different synergies, like Wrathpith Globe. I thought about using the some pretty efficient nodes to get a lot of spell damage for just a couple of nodes, and using that to scale up the attack damage pretty heavily, because I'm like, oh, Wrathpith Globe, if I can get up to 6,000 health, that's like 180% attack damage. That's a truckload of attack damage. So my first thought is I'm going to go an Elementalist, and I'm going to scale all of the Heralds. Using Herald of Purity, I'll be able to get a sizable amount of attack damage, and then I will scale that with like Herald of Ash, and I will also get all of the wand notables that give you the percent physical damage with wands as an extra element. I'm like, okay, this will be a pretty crazy way to scale your damage. And maybe it is. Maybe it is if you have some high tier steel rings with tier 1 flat physical damage, or perhaps if you have increased Herald of Purity effect through those rings, the unique rings, that would probably work out pretty okay. However, as a league starter, this very, very gear dependent skill felt very, very weak. And in order to compensate for that, I ended up building way too much damage, not enough survivability. I ended up taking Flesh and Stone, and I wanted to, make it so that I was blinding nearby enemies, taking less damage from enemies far away. That worked out really well, but that also meant that I couldn't use all of my heralds, which became a problem. And then I tried to switch over to Spellslinger in order to salvage it. Did it on a 3-link with Arc, which worked out okay. I decided it was feeling good enough with the Arc that I was going to try to put the Arc on a 6-link that I happened to make. I was attempting on a Temple chest piece with double resist, high life, mana. Seemed pretty good. I was trying to make that a 5-link just to progress a little bit, just using some of my fusings. Ended up getting a 6-link and 70 fuses. Felt incredible. Now, I thought to myself, well, I'll just take that 6-link and use Arc Spellslinger on a 6-link. I didn't think that the issue there would be that I couldn't use any of my heralds, because I was going to be reserving all of my mana. I barely had enough to get Blood and Sand, or Flesh and Stone rather, which is something I absolutely needed for survival because I didn't have a lot of defensive mechanics going on for me. Elementalist, you get like some fizz reduction from your golems and some regen from your golems, but not a lot other than that. So I was having a ton of trouble getting this rolling. And I had spent something along the lines of 80 to 120 regret orbs over the course of that character trying to make it work. Just couldn't do it. By the time I got up to yellow maps finally, which took me forever compared to normal by the way, I decided to reroll. Now, here's where the interesting part comes in. I rerolled, decided to try one of the other new mechanics, one I had a little bit more confidence in. Many of you probably have already heard, the Archmage support is pretty busted. I decided to do a Trickster because I thought that the Ascendancy, where I would have a chance to gain back a portion of my mana whenever I use the skill, would be really nice, especially considering I could basically use movement skills, especially with the new second wind support with Flame Dash, giving cooldown reduction and an extra charge to basically top off my mana, which worked extremely well by the way. I was leveling with Lightning Trap up until I got Shock Nova. I ended up using Shock Nova with Archmage, and when I got my first Ascendancy, it was the smoothest leveling experience. I had 2 4-links, that's all. I wasn't leveling with the Tabula. I never bothered to farm one up on my first character because I got a 6-link earlier than I would have gotten to the point where I could have farmed that. And I just blew through the content. It was incredible. It felt like every single point was impactful. I feel like perhaps Archmage is a little bit overtuned. It's starting to feel a little bit better in the end game, although once I'm still very poorly geared now that I'm getting up into still yellow maps. I basically caught up where my first character was, but now that I've gotten back into end game, it's starting to feel maybe a little bit more balanced. I'm still crushing bosses in like 3 casts tops, which is pretty incredible, but Yeah, it's quite strong. And I changed over from Shock Nova, tried Arc, and I ended up settling on Ball Lightning with slower projectiles. And it's been working wonders, even though it has a very low damage effectiveness modifier. And one of my goals was to use a very high damage effectiveness modifier. I was able to see that it hit often enough, especially when you're casting it with things like Spell Echo or Unleash, that you were with the slower projectiles hitting things just numerous times, and the added damage was really stacking up. It felt great. I wasn't able to make some of the other things like a Wave of Conviction I thought of perhaps doing something with Discharge because it has a 150% damage effectiveness multiplier. Shock Nova was pretty good at 120%, but I am very much liking Ball Lightning because it allows me to keep some range on some of these scarier mobs, of which there are many. And having to be up on close and on top of those things with limited defenses, even as a trickster, my defenses feel kind of limited against these delirium mobs. I think it feels pretty good. So that's where I stand right now. It's a little bit of a league update. Hopefully they fix delirium. I really would like to see this league succeed because I think in theory it looks very good. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. How has your league starter fared? Have you had any similar experiences with some of the more broken or disappointing new skills? Leave that all in the comment section below. This has been Ryan from Behind Eyes Gaming, and I will see you next time. Bye!